There is a lesson that many people learn far too late in life. They believe that every conflict can be solved through patience, every difficult person can be transformed through kindness, and every toxic relationship simply needs more communication. It sounds noble, it sounds compassionate, but it ignores one of the oldest truths about human nature. People rarely change because someone else wants them to. They change only when they are forced by their own experiences, or when they possess the rare willingness to confront themselves. That is why intelligent people stop asking, "How do I change this person?" They begin asking a far more powerful question: what is this person's true nature? The moment you ask that question, everything changes. Most toxic people do not announce themselves. They rarely walk into your life wearing a warning sign. Instead, they arrive with charm, confidence, sympathy, or even vulnerability. They study what you value. They discover your emotional needs. They learn your fears, your ambitions, and your desire to be accepted. Then, little by little, they begin shaping your reality without you noticing. This is why so many intelligent people become trapped by manipulation. Intelligence alone is not enough. Knowledge does not protect you if emotion is making the decisions. One of the greatest weaknesses of the human mind is projection. We naturally assume other people think the way we do. If you are honest, you expect honesty. If you are loyal, you expect loyalty. If you forgive easily, you assume others carry the same capacity for forgiveness. But human nature is far more complicated than that. Not everyone is guided by the same values. Some people are guided by control, others by envy, others by insecurity so deep that they cannot tolerate seeing another person at peace. They feel powerful only when someone else feels confused, guilty, or emotionally dependent. This is not always conscious evil. More often, it is unconscious conditioning repeated over many years. A person who learned that manipulation produces results continues manipulating. A person who discovered that playing the victim attracts attention continues becoming the victim. Human beings repeat behaviors that reward them. Once you understand this, you stop taking everything personally. Their criticism is not always about you. Their anger is not always about you. Their jealousy is not always about you. Often, you are simply standing in front of a storm that began long before you arrived. This realization is liberating because it shifts your focus away from fixing them and toward understanding the patterns that define them. Patterns never lie. Anyone can pretend for a day. Many can pretend for a month. Very few can hide their true character over time. Watch what people repeatedly do, not what they repeatedly promise. Someone who constantly shifts blame teaches you something. Someone who never apologizes teaches you something. Someone who celebrates your failures more enthusiastically than your successes teaches you something. Someone who creates drama wherever they go teaches you something. Believe the pattern. Too often, we ignore repeated evidence because we have become emotionally attached to an imagined version of someone. We fall in love with their potential instead of accepting their reality. Potential is not character. Hope is not evidence. Intentions are not behavior. One of the most dangerous habits is explaining away every warning sign. We tell ourselves they were stressed, they had a difficult childhood, they didn't mean it, they'll be different next time. Sometimes those explanations are true, but explanations do not erase consequences. Understanding why someone behaves badly does not require you to tolerate that behavior. Compassion without boundaries eventually becomes self-destruction. This is where emotional maturity begins. You learn that kindness and wisdom are not the same thing. Kindness gives everyone another chance. Wisdom decides who deserves continued access to your life. The truly powerful individual develops the ability to observe before reacting. Instead of becoming emotionally consumed by every interaction, they become a quiet student of human behavior. They notice inconsistencies, They pay attention to motivations. They recognize manipulation before it becomes influence. Manipulation usually follows predictable patterns. One day they flatter you, the next day they criticize you. They alternate affection with distance, they make you question your memory, they convince you that your emotional reactions are the real problem. They make you feel guilty for establishing perfectly reasonable boundaries. Slowly, your confidence begins to disappear. You spend more time defending yourself than understanding yourself. And this is precisely where toxic people gain power, not because they are stronger than you, but because they keep you emotionally distracted. The greatest defense against manipulation is awareness. When you understand the game, you no longer play by its rules. Notice how calm people cannot easily be controlled. Notice how individuals with strong self-respect rarely become trapped in endless emotional cycles. Notice how those who understand human nature rarely appear surprised by betrayal. It is not because they have become cynical. It is because they have stopped confusing appearances with reality. History repeatedly teaches this lesson. Empires collapsed because leaders trusted appearances instead of intentions. Businesses failed because executives ignored obvious patterns. Relationships ended because people believed promises while overlooking repeated actions. Human nature leaves clues everywhere. Your responsibility is to notice them. There is another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes toxic people remain in our lives because they satisfy a hidden emotional need within us. Perhaps we seek approval. Perhaps we fear loneliness. Perhaps we confuse emotional intensity with genuine connection. The toxic person is only half of the equation. The other half is the part of ourselves that keeps opening the door. That realization is not meant to produce guilt. It is meant to restore your power, because once you recognize your own patterns, you are no longer dependent on changing someone else's behavior. You begin changing your own decisions, and that is where freedom begins. The strongest people are not those who never encounter manipulation. They are the ones who recognize it early enough to protect their peace. They understand that life becomes infinitely simpler when you stop negotiating with someone's nature and start responding to reality instead of fantasy. The moment you stop trying to rewrite another person's character, you recover the energy that was always meant to build your own. Remember this: the first victory over toxic people is not defeating them. It is seeing them clearly before they ever convince you to doubt yourself. Once you begin seeing toxic people for who they truly are, the next challenge is far more difficult. Recognition alone does not protect you. You can understand someone's manipulative nature perfectly and still become trapped by it if you continue reacting emotionally. Awareness is the first layer of defense. Emotional discipline is the shield that makes that awareness useful. This is where many people lose the battle. They recognize manipulation, but they still feel compelled to respond. They want to defend themselves against every accusation. They want to correct every false story. They want to prove they are right, expose the other person's hypocrisy, or finally receive the understanding they have been waiting for. They believe that if they can just explain themselves one more time, the toxic person will eventually see reason. But manipulation does not depend on reason, it depends on your reaction. The person who seeks to control you is rarely searching for truth. They are searching for emotional access. They want to know which words make you angry, which criticisms make you insecure, which situations make you anxious, and which fears cause you to lose your composure. Every emotional reaction becomes information. Every outburst becomes a map that tells them exactly where your defenses are weakest. This is why emotional self-control is not simply a personal virtue. It is a strategic advantage. Think about the people who possess genuine influence. They rarely appear rushed by emotion. They do not reveal every frustration the moment it appears. They understand that emotions are real, but they also understand that not every emotion deserves immediate expression. Between feeling something and acting upon it exists a space. Within that space lives judgment, wisdom, and power. The toxic person wants to eliminate that space. They provoke you because a reactive mind is easier to control than a disciplined one. Consider how often conflicts begin: a sarcastic remark, an unnecessary criticism, a passive-aggressive comment disguised as humor, a deliberate misunderstanding. None of these actions are particularly destructive by themselves. Their power lies in the reaction they produce. The manipulator throws the emotional spark into the room and quietly waits for someone else to become the fire. The moment you explode, the conversation is no longer about their behavior. It becomes about yours. Now you are defending your tone instead of discussing their actions. Now you are apologizing for your reaction while they avoid responsibility for provoking it. This pattern repeats itself in families, friendships, workplaces, and relationships across the world. Power belongs to the individual who controls the emotional temperature of the room. That is why silence is often misunderstood. Many people believe silence is weakness because they associate strength with speaking louder, arguing harder, or winning every confrontation. But silence can be one of the strongest forms of communication when it is intentional rather than fearful. Silence denies manipulation its reward. Not every accusation deserves an answer. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves space inside your mind. Imagine carrying a precious container filled with your energy. Every argument, every unnecessary explanation, every attempt to convince someone determined to misunderstand you removes something from that container. Most people spend their days giving away their emotional resources without realizing it. By evening, they are exhausted, not because life demanded so much, but because they handed their peace to anyone willing to challenge it. Your attention is your most valuable possession. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If someone can control your attention, they begin controlling the direction of your thoughts. If they control your thoughts long enough, they begin influencing your decisions. And if they influence your decisions, they slowly begin shaping your future. This is why emotionally intelligent people guard their attention with extraordinary discipline. They ask themselves a simple question before responding: is this worth my peace? Most situations are not. One of the hardest lessons to accept is that you are not obligated to defend your character before people committed to misunderstanding it. Some individuals have already decided who you are. No explanation will change a conclusion they emotionally benefit from believing. The desire to be understood is deeply human. The need to be understood by everyone is a dangerous weakness. There comes a moment when maturity demands that you stop chasing validation from those incapable of giving it. Instead, let your consistency become your explanation. Let your actions become your argument. Let time reveal the truth instead of exhausting yourself trying to force people to see it today. Equally important are boundaries. Many people imagine boundaries as walls built to punish others. In reality, healthy boundaries exist to protect what is valuable. A nation protects its borders because peace requires security. A garden grows because it has fences that prevent destruction. Likewise, your emotional life flourishes only when you decide who receives access to it. Without boundaries, kindness becomes permission for exploitation. Without boundaries, generosity becomes an invitation to manipulation. Without boundaries, empathy slowly transforms into emotional exhaustion. Remember that every time you tolerate repeated disrespect without consequence, you silently teach people how they are allowed to treat you. Human beings observe limits before they respect them. Those who repeatedly ignore your boundaries are revealing something important. They are not interested in mutual respect. They are interested in unrestricted access. Do not confuse accessibility with goodness. You can be compassionate without becoming available to every demand. You can forgive without restoring trust. You can remain respectful while choosing distance. One of the greatest expressions of confidence is the ability to walk away from conversations that no longer deserve your presence. Walking away does not always mean physically leaving. Sometimes it means refusing to argue. Sometimes it means declining to justify yourself. Sometimes it means recognizing that peace is worth more than being right. The strongest response is often the one that surprises people the most: calmness. Calmness unsettles those who expect chaos. Composure frustrates those who rely on emotional reactions. Detachment weakens those who depend upon emotional dependence. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent to the world. It means becoming selective about where your emotional investment belongs. Not everyone deserves equal access to your heart, your thoughts, or your energy. As your discipline grows, something remarkable begins to happen. Toxic people gradually lose interest in you. Not because they have changed, but because you are no longer providing what they were seeking. Manipulators search for emotional openings. When they consistently find patience instead of panic, boundaries instead of guilt, and confidence instead of desperation, they often move toward easier targets. That is one of life's quiet paradoxes. The less available you become for emotional manipulation, the more peaceful your life becomes. You stop living in constant reaction and begin living with deliberate intention. You reclaim the attention that once belonged to unnecessary conflict and invest it into your purpose, your growth, and your future. And that is real power, not the ability to control another person's behavior, but the ability to ensure they never control yours. Remember this: the moment your emotions become impossible to manipulate is the moment toxic people lose the only weapon they ever truly had against you. By now, you understand two ideas that change the way you see people forever. First, you cannot afford to be blind to human nature. You must learn to recognize patterns instead of believing promises. Second, awareness alone is not enough. Your greatest protection is emotional discipline, the ability to remain calm when someone is trying to provoke you into giving away your power. But there is one final lesson, and perhaps it is the most liberating of them all. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is not to defeat them. It is to outgrow the battlefield entirely. This may sound disappointing to the part of you that wants justice. After all, when someone has lied to you, manipulated you, humiliated you, or tried to undermine your confidence, the natural instinct is to fight back. You want them to experience what they made you feel. You imagine that if you can expose them, embarrass them, or prove them wrong, you will finally find peace. But look carefully at what happens. The more you focus on defeating them, the more your life begins revolving around them. Your thoughts become occupied by their actions. Your energy becomes consumed by their behavior. Your future becomes delayed by your obsession with the past. Without realizing it, the toxic person continues controlling your life, even in their absence. This is one of the oldest traps in human psychology. We believe revenge will set us free, yet revenge often extends the emotional relationship we are trying to escape. Every hour spent replaying conversations, imagining arguments, or planning ways to prove someone wrong is an hour that no longer belongs to your own growth. Your attention is finite. Every minute invested in resentment is a minute stolen from your purpose. The truly powerful individual understands that life is governed by opportunity cost. Every decision to focus on one thing automatically means choosing not to focus on something else. If your mind is consumed by toxic people, then your ambitions receive less attention. Your creativity receives less attention. Your relationships with good people receive less attention. That is too expensive a price to pay. History offers countless examples of individuals who allowed personal enemies to define the direction of their lives. Entire careers have been destroyed because talented people became more interested in defeating rivals than developing themselves. They won arguments but lost years. Do not make the same mistake. The greatest victory is becoming someone whose future no longer depends on another person's approval, apology, or failure. Freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to change before allowing yourself to move forward. This requires a profound shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "How do I make them regret losing me?" ask, "How do I build a life so meaningful that their opinion no longer matters?" Instead of asking, "How do I expose their lies?" ask, "How do I become so consistent that truth speaks louder than any accusation?" Instead of asking, "How do I win against them?" ask, "How do I win against the weaker version of myself that once accepted less than I deserved?" These questions redirect your energy toward the only person you truly have the power to shape you. There is another reason success unsettles toxic people more than conflict ever could. Toxic individuals often depend upon emotional dependence. They need your attention because attention validates their influence. They need your reactions because reactions reassure them they still occupy space in your mind. When you quietly improve your life, you remove the very thing they depended upon. You become emotionally independent. And emotional independence is one of the rarest forms of power. Think about the people you admire most. Rarely are they remembered because they defeated every critic. They are remembered because they refused to allow criticism to interrupt their mission. Every meaningful accomplishment requires selective attention. A builder cannot construct a cathedral while constantly turning around to argue with every passerby. An author cannot finish a masterpiece while responding to every insult. An entrepreneur cannot build a company while obsessing over competitors every waking hour. Likewise, you cannot build an extraordinary life if your emotional energy remains tied to ordinary conflicts. The truth is that your future demands sacrifices. Sometimes the sacrifice is comfort, sometimes it is certainty, and sometimes the greatest sacrifice is your attachment to people who no longer deserve access to your life. Distance is often misunderstood. Many people see distance as weakness, avoidance, or surrender. In reality, distance is frequently wisdom. A gardener removes weeds not because the flowers are weak, but because healthy growth requires the right environment. Likewise, your mind flourishes when surrounded by respect, honesty, encouragement, and accountability. Environment shapes identity. Stay around constant negativity long enough, and even an optimistic mind begins expecting disappointment. Remain surrounded by manipulation, and eventually you begin questioning your own instincts. Spend years among people who criticize every dream, and ambition slowly starts feeling unrealistic. Protecting your environment is not selfish, it is responsibility. There is a quiet confidence that develops when you no longer feel obligated to attend every argument or rescue every broken relationship. You begin recognizing that not every chapter deserves another page. Some stories end because they have already taught you everything they were meant to teach. Accepting that truth allows you to move forward without bitterness. Forgiveness also takes on a different meaning. Many people believe forgiveness means pretending nothing happened or inviting harmful people back into their lives. Real forgiveness is different. It means refusing to let past injuries continue occupying present space inside your mind. You release the emotional burden without reopening the door. You let go of resentment without surrendering your wisdom. The lesson remains, the pain does not. As you continue growing, something unexpected happens. Your standards rise. The conversations you tolerate change. The friendships you choose change. The opportunities you pursue change. Even your silence changes. No longer is silence born from fear. Now it comes from confidence. You discover that peace is not something the world gives you. It is something you protect through every decision you make, and perhaps the most remarkable transformation is this: toxic people gradually lose significance. They become part of your history rather than the center of your present. Their words no longer define your identity. Their opinions no longer dictate your choices. Their attempts to provoke you become little more than distant echoes from a chapter you have already outgrown. That is what genuine strength looks like. Not domination, not revenge, not endless conflict, but quiet mastery over yourself. When you master yourself, other people's attempts to control you begin to lose their power. When your purpose becomes stronger than your distractions, manipulation loses its appeal. When your vision for the future becomes greater than your attachment to the past, you stop asking why toxic people entered your life and begin appreciating the wisdom they forced you to develop. In the end, toxic people can teach you one of life's greatest lessons, not by their kindness, but by their example. They remind you exactly the kind of person you refuse to become. They reveal the importance of character, discipline, and self-respect. They challenge you to build a life that cannot be shaken by someone else's dysfunction. So leave this conversation with one decision. Stop fighting battles that keep you small. Invest that energy in becoming wiser, calmer, stronger, and more purposeful than you were yesterday. Build a life so rich in meaning that bitterness has no room to survive. Because your greatest victory will never be proving toxic people wrong. It will be becoming someone they no longer have the power to reach.